Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Cates, and I am part of the artist development team at Film Independent. I'm so excited to welcome you to the inaugural Film Independent Sloan Salon. This is the first event of an ongoing series of conversations that will bring together those working on the cutting edge of science and technology and the artists who depict those stories on screen. Tonight's topic, which I am incredibly stoked about, is women in space. Our panelists include 3 of our Sloan-supported storytellers who are developing projects about female astronauts. And we are also so incredibly lucky to be joined by two extraordinary aerospace engineers from NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, Dr. Swati Mohan and Tracy Drain. We are honored to host this event in partnership with the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, which encourages artists to create more realistic and accurate stories about science and technology, as well as to challenge existing stereotypes about scientists and engineers and media. Film Independent's collaboration with the Sloan Foundation includes a robust granting program to support eligible projects in our episodic lab, our producing lab, the fast track finance market, as well as a distribution grant. We are currently accepting applications for fast track and encourage you to apply if you have a scripted feature project grounded in science or technology. You can find more information on the Film Independent website, and I'll also put the link in the chat for everybody. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our fantastic moderator for the evening, Wendy Calhoun. Wendy is a Peabody-winning TV writer and producer whose credits include Station 19, Empire, Nashville, Justified, and Revenge.
No pressure. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad everyone can join us today. We are going to have a fun conversation. I have the pleasure of introducing one more time Tracy Drain, the lead flight systems engineer, Europa Clipper mission at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, aka JPL, and Dr. Swati Mohan, Mars 2020 Guidance, Navigation, and Control Operations Lead at NASA's JPL. Hello, welcome. As we start to get into this, I'd love for you, Tracy and Swati, to tell us a little bit about your work.
So I'll go first. I'm Tracy Drain, and I'm a systems engineer. And for folks who don't know what that is, it means you have a whole bunch of different things that have to work together to accomplish a mission: telecom, thermal, power, how you control the spacecraft. And we are the people who help work with everyone to ensure we make a design that works, and that when we're flying the spacecraft, if something goes a little off into the weeds, we figure out how to figure out what happened, fix it, get back on track, and get the mission done.
So to follow on Tracy, I am also a systems engineer, but I focus on one particular area called guidance, navigation, control, which is like the eyes and ears of the spacecraft. We figure out where the spacecraft is, how it's pointed, and how to get from where we are to where we need to be during the mission, during cruise, or during entry, descent, and landing onto another planet or around orbit of another planet. It involves working with a bunch of hardware and software and bringing all the pieces together to get the mission done and help the scientists point to where they want to get their science done.
Very cool. I also have the pleasure of introducing the Sloan Episodic Grantee writer, Katherine Ruppe. Hi, Katherine. And you have a project called Liftoff, is that right? Can you tell me a little bit about you and your project? You're muted. Hey, we want to hear you.
Oh, I did it. All right. I swore I wasn't going to do that. Yes, I'm Katherine Ruppe. I'm so happy to be on this panel with you all. I am a former camera operator on film and TV that segued into writing. And my project is Liftoff, and it's a limited drama series, kind of in the vein of Hidden Figures meets The Right Stuff. And it's about America's first female astronauts. There were 6 intrepid women who blasted through the Brotherhood space flight in 1978. And they really proved that the right stuff means having the guts to rocket to space, plus the brilliance to explore the universe, but also while often juggling, motherhood, relationships, and duty. And so I intercut this story as well with the heartrending tale of the Challenger disaster in 1986, because one of the first women astronauts, Judith Resnick, was on that flight. Sally Ride and the remaining women really pushed for some safety reform. So with this dual time period perspective, we see how these amazing women really transformed NASA and the space flight program. And they really inspired millions of girls to reach for the stars.
Yes, they inspired me. I can remember, as you telling the story of these places that you mentioned in your film, I can remember where I was. Like, I have sense memory of where I was when some of those things happened, for sure. We also have Guneet, Monga, and Rahul Chittella, producers of the Sloan Fast Track grantees for Kalpana. Can you tell us a little bit about you and Kalpana?
Sure. Both Guneet and I are independent filmmakers from India. We collaborated on this fascinating real-life story of Kalpana Chawla, who is known as India's daughter and was the first astronaut from India to go to space. And she remains an inspiration for all of us. And we're so excited and thrilled to tell her story along with these fascinating astronauts who've been supporting us from NASA. And we'd love to speak more about it through this course.
Yes, and the idea is to tell, and we're so excited about having Film Independent and Sloan's backing us, because the idea is to tell the story for the whole world, even though it is a story of an Indian origin woman, but she's somebody who's inspired millions of girls around the world. And the idea is to have a global impact and a footprint with our story and like she had with her journey. And we are so happy to be here and grateful for the support.
Thank you for joining us. We know that you are on the other side of the world from us at this time, but I have to tell you, I took a trip to India in 2018 and it was life-changing. Such a beautiful place, and I'm so happy that you're getting to tell this story. I think the whole world needs to hear it. So we have a couple of clips that we're going to share today. The first one we'll see is an overview of NASA's Psyche mission, and that's a journey to a unique metal asteroid orbiting the sun between Mars and Jupiter. And then we have a second clip that you'll get to see, and that one is from February 18th, 2021. And that's when viewers around the world watched live as NASA's Mars 2020 mission team confirmed the touchdown of the Perseverance rover on the surface of Mars. And I remember watching that too. So let's take a look.
It's a shame, but living in the city, very rarely do you get to see stars.
I feel like I have a new connection to them in a way that I haven't before.
If I'm out in the desert and I look up at the sky, you just see millions and millions of places that we should be going.
It's almost baked into our DNA, the desire to go and explore, right? That's the whole reason why we left the forest and then traveled across oceans just to see what's out there.
I was born in 1969, which is the year we landed on the moon. So I am a space baby.
When I was a kid, there were guys driving cars on the moon. They're driving cars on the moon. That's so cool, right? I want to do that.
All the rocky planets that we know of all have got a metal core in their center. And especially for the Earth, it's the source of our magnetic field. But we don't know a lot about our core. What we've learned about it, we learn indirectly because we can't go there.
It's too hot. The pressure's too high. Our instruments would melt. Can't drill a hole that deep in the Earth or other planets. It turns out we can study a planetary core out in space because there's this one object. It's one object called Psyche.
16 Psyche is an asteroid that orbits the sun out between Mars and Jupiter.
It is the only asteroid that we're aware of that is 95% metal or more and is really huge. It's about 200 kilometers across in one axis.
So it's about the size of Massachusetts.
It's believed that it may be a remnant core of an early planetesimal that was formed in the very, very earliest parts of the formation of the solar system.
And after this planet started forming and this metal core formed inside of that, it collided with other bodies that then stripped off the rocky mantle, leaving this core in place.
Psyche gives us the opportunity to visit a core, the only way that humankind can ever do. And it would be the first metal object that humankind has ever visited.
We've been approved to go in August of 2022. So we talked with our mission design and navigation team, and in fact, they were able to come up with what is probably the most optimal trajectory, doing a Mars flyby.
Flies past Mars, gives us a gravity assist, uses that propulsion system to then slowly creep up toward the end of 2025, getting there in early 2026.
SSL is building the solar electric propulsion chassis. When we do the mechanical, physical integration of each instrument on the spacecraft, we'll work hand in hand with each of the providers to get out to Psyche and do a full discovery mission.
We've figured out a way for many, many people to build something together so complicated, no one person can understand it, but it all has to work together perfectly for decades without fail.
Just the fact that these things work at all is a thrill. It's just a testament to the engineers at JPL and the companies that we collaborate with, that they can build these things.
We can understand this universe that we live in. We can explore it, we can learn about it, and we can be a part of something which is much bigger than just us or just this planet. We will see new things when we visit a world made of metal.
Propulsion, go. EDL phase lead, go.
We have deemed Perseverance ready to execute entry, descent, and landing on her own.
Confirmation of entry interface. Perseverance is currently going 5.3 kilometers per second, about 120 kilometers from the surface of Mars. It will start controlling its path to the landing target. Parachute has deployed and we are seeing significant deceleration. The heat shield has been separated. Perseverance now has radar lock on the ground. The back shell has separated. Skycam maneuver has started, about 20 meters off the surface.
Tango Delta, nominal.
Touchdown confirmed. Perseverance safely on the surface of Mars, ready to begin seeking the sands of past life.
Wow. That's all I can say is wow. It's just, it's out of this world, like literally out of this world. Tracy, I want to start with you. I'm so happy to say that I've had the pleasure of meeting Tracy before the pandemic. I've seen her in person, and you are a real inspiration. And I just have to tell you, in watching that first clip, how moving it was for me to see you. And we say, you know, if she can see it, she can be it. Well, as a fellow Black woman, and to see you in this mix, it just moves me so much. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your relationship to that particular project.
I will, yeah, and I'll try to keep it from going too long because I love that project so much. It was so touching to see all the people that I worked with on the project on film too, because I joined the mission in 2018, which was not long after it was selected to be a real mission, and we're heading into a preliminary mission system review, we called it. And I joined as a project system engineer. And before I talked about systems engineering as making sure all the different parts of the spacecraft work. Well, at the project system level, you're making sure that the spacecraft and the instruments and the ground data system and the navigation, like all those things work together so the whole mission is successful. I was the deputy project system engineer working for David O, the gentleman who said he was a space baby. And so it was my responsibility to work with him to kind of guide the team through all of the things that we needed to do to get all the way to our critical design review, which happened in December of 2020, which is where the whole team comes together for a 5-day, all-day review to talk through all the different elements of the design with subject matter experts from all over to try to poke holes in what we're doing in a nice way, because they want to find problems that we can fix before we launch. And it was really cool just to be part of the mission, even for those short 2 years, because as you heard the principal investigator scientist, Lindy Elkin-Stanton, say, this is a really unique object out there hanging out in our backyard in the asteroid belt for us to go and study and learn more about planetary cores in general. And the last thing I'll say is it's really cool how the science evolves. The Psyche asteroid is so tiny that you can barely see it from the Earth, even with really strong telescopes, and get very limited data. But they're already learning enough to kind of change the scientific theory about what it could be. And so it's becoming even more of a mystery that when the spacecraft eventually gets out there and can study it, we think we're going to be all sorts of surprised about what it finds.
I think so too. Swati, what are you working on right now? And you know, did you have a relationship to these clips that we just saw? And what's going on?
Yeah, so I spent the last about 8 years of my career working on Mars 2020 Perseverance landing. So I joined in 2013 on the mission, back when it was just paper, right? A set of, bullet points on a slide of, we want to go, in 2020 and do this type of thing, and just working the cruise and entry, descent, and landing system from that, rough piece of paper all the way through building it and testing it and flying it till it eventually got on Mars was just an incredible process, because you really learn things throughout that process. You learn decisions you made, 6 years ago come back to bite you in the butt when you actually have to see it done. And then learning through all of that and seeing it work was just enormously satisfying on landing day. I still haven't actually watched the full clip, the full landing footage video on that day. I think I need to wait a little bit longer before the trauma goes down, but I get chills every time I see that video. And it doesn't look it, but there's a huge team behind that. Because of the pandemic, we did a once in a lifetime type of how do you fly a mission before that you'd never had to do. We usually have all hands on deck, but this time we had people cross JPL in 3 different rooms, and then so many people just at home watching in that it kind of spread around. But to have it all come together despite having a pandemic to fly through, despite having an earthquake that hit us 20 minutes before launch, it was just mind-boggling that we got to that point. And it's been immensely successful after that. I actually transitioned off about a week after landing day to be a supervisor, but I could keep track of it as it rolls around on Mars.
Wow. I have to ask, because we're here to talk about gender. Have you faced challenges in your field with being a female or being a woman?
I have. I mean, in my field, there's still the minority, very obviously so, especially in the hardcore technical aspects of my field. And it takes more effort to, make yourself heard and make yourself seen as equal to those around you. And it's a fight that you keep fighting every single day, every project. Keeping your voice heard at that table until it's taken as par. I will say that Mars 2020 was an incredibly diverse team, and one of the ones that I worked on that in particular did a really good job of bringing together people from all different backgrounds and genders, and even in the LGBT community, into one project. So I feel like we had enough diversity that we did start to respect that, and that helped build the team, not just as a good team, but as a family. That really was one of the things that helped us get through the pandemic, because we had those tight bonds and tight respect for each other.
What about you, Tracy? How has this journey been as a woman at JPL and in your field of work?
Yeah, what I'll say about it is everyone's getting a little more familiar with this concept of intersectionality, right? Where things happen and you can't tell, did that happen because I'm a woman? Did that happen because I'm Black? Did that happen because I'm young? Is it because I'm in this subsection of JPL and not that subset? Like, there's so many different things that play around it, that one of the things that can be a little frustrating when things happen is you literally don't know and can't know. But one of the things that is maybe I'll say a silver lining about that is you have the internal option of deciding, well, I'm going to decide it was because of that, and therefore I'll treat it this way, and we're just going to power through. And that's not to say that we should just ignore things and it'll be fine, but there really is some power to our own perception and our ways of dealing with things that happen. I'll give you an example with no names to protect the innocent. At one point, many years ago in my career, so nothing to do with psyche. So I was fairly young. I was hired to do a specific role where I needed to help some folks figure out what they were going to be doing with their job. And it was a weird position to be in. I'd only been around for maybe 9 years. And that sounds like a long time in regular industry, really not in our industry. And in setting up the meeting with these folks, a person said to me, what makes you think I need you to tell me how to do my job? And I'm like, oh! And that could have gone all sorts of bad ways. But I chose to interpret that as, you literally don't know why we're having this conversation. Like, you might have some impression that we think you're doing a bad job, and like, that's about it. And so I got to say, the role we're asking you to do is one that's not super well defined. We change it for every mission, and therefore I'm trying to help you understand expectations, give you a voice in setting the expectations and deciding what this role is so that you can be successful, we'll be happy, and it'll all be good. And that super changed the tenor of our conversation. And I don't know if this person said that because of my gender, because of my age, because of my color, like, don't care, but we managed to work through it. So that's how I see it.
Very interesting. So I have to ask you, Katherine, what inspired you to tell stories about women in science, in space?
Well, my number one inspiration is my daughter, my young daughter. She's 11, Chloe. And all young girls really like her, who love science and space, but don't really see their stories on screen so much. When we saw that video of Swati counting down Mars 2020, it really sent chills through me. I was sitting here at this table with my daughter watching it live. And we had seen 2 years ago, we did a tour of JPL, and we had gotten to see them building Mars 2020. And it was so exciting. And I was really looking for a story of female empowerment and exploration. And I really found it in the story of these 6 first women astronauts. And I also love that they formed this sisterhood. They really united and supported each other. They were super competitive, but they really banded together. And I come from a family of 5 girls, so it means a lot to me, sisterhood. And they really had tremendous achievements in spaceflight, and I felt like we hadn't seen their stories yet.
How about you, Guneet, and Rahul? What about you? What was it about doing a story that had women in space?
Firstly, thank you for sharing these videos. I had tears looking at both the videos, and Tracy, Swati, just once again, such a joy to have you here. And you guys are really changing the world. I think really we are telling the story of Kalpana Chawla, an Indian astronaut who was the first one to go to space from here. And I remember being in school when and seeing her journey, and having the whole school and everyone discuss it and be so influenced by it. We've been following her journey in India and celebrating her for such a long time. And she was unfortunately the part of Columbia that crashed on landing. In her life, I don't think it is, and how we see it, it's not about what happened, but she lived her dream. And things like, and the stuff that she said, the research that we've done around her, and the life that she lived, women that she championed, even coming to US in the early 80s and having to build a life and to get into NASA. And then to work your way up, as an astronaut, it's a story that inspires us, and we hope to tell it in a way that it inspires little girls around the world to dream, because to be able to do this. So we are smitten by her life. We are smitten by the world of space, and as storytellers, I mean, this is our it's an honor, it's a pleasure to be able to protect the story, to be able to nurture it, and to be able to tell it to the whole world.
Rahul, how about you?
Yeah. I mean, taking a bit from what Guneet said, Kalpana is so celebrated as a hero in India. She's called India's daughter, and we've all grown up listening to her stories as kids, that Kalpana Chawla went to space, and Kalpana Chawla traveled all the way from India to America at a time when it was really not heard of, especially from a small town in northern India, where really girls are not even allowed to, they're expected to get married and then serve the husband. But here was a girl who protested and fought the family and the society, and traveled not just from one city to the other, but traveled across oceans, determined and actually obsessed to get into NASA so that she could go to space. And what Guneet started the journey on this project, and when she and I started speaking about this project, what I realized is that despite being celebrated as a hero in out here and knowing what textbooks teach us and what news teaches us, there's so much more about her life that I didn't know, despite her being known as a hero in our country. This whole journey and what she had to go through at a time when we just know it as headlines, but the kind of struggles that she had to say and the kind of vision that she had in such a young mind. And what really hooked me onto her life and her story is why she was obsessed with space. She was desperately wanting to go to space because she said that's the only place from where you can see an Earth with no borders, with no man-made borders. Now, that for me was and continues to be the inspiration to tell her story, because we need that thought now more than ever. So they're all, Swati, Tracy, they're all doing things that we, of course, are inspired now, but which we'll always, we'll see the benefits of it as time progresses, because this is a much larger inspiration for people that we've not met and people yet, but hopefully whose stories we'll hear as time passes, because they'll be inspired by this.
Yeah, it's wild to think that it takes being in outer space to remind us of our own shared humanity, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that there's something really beautiful about that. Tracy, I'm so curious, what as you were growing up, were there any, films or television or even books, stories that got you inspired to think, you know what, I think I'm going to work at JPL someday?
Absolutely, and it's hilarious that it's almost so typical when you talk to people around the lab. Like, Star Trek was such a big thing for me, and it's because my mom grew up loving Star Trek. She was young enough, I guess, that she remembers Uhura on the original Star Trek, who looked a lot like her older sister, like Katherine. She was from a family of girls. There were 4 of them, and they used to run home to turn on the TV and see what was going on with Star Trek because of her. But then she got hooked on the show and hooked on science fiction and this idea of voyages of discovery. She ended up not going into science or technology or anything, but when she had me and my brother, she really nurtured us on that love of science fiction, that love of curiosity and exploration in general. And every time I found something I wanted to go off and do, she was always very supportive, like, yeah, go do that thing. Yeah, go do that thing. And around high school was about the time when I decided that I wanted to study engineering and set my goals on NASA. And luckily for me, even though we were from a not a wealthy family, she worked at McDonald's most of the time when I was a kid. We lived with my grandmother. She didn't tell me any of her doubts. She didn't say, I don't know how we're going to pay for that. I don't know. I don't know. She just said, sure, that's what you're going to do. And fortunately for me, I was one of those super nerdy kids, did really well on tests, and I got a full ride to go to college. And I went to University of Kentucky, landed an internship at NASA Langley as a junior. I mean, it was almost like the dominoes just fell one after the other. Now, there were struggles along the way, but it really was inspiration from science fiction, the encouragement from my mom to chase my dreams, and then studying really hard and taking advantage of opportunities when they came. And I landed the job at JPL right out of grad school from Georgia Tech and have been here for 21 years now.
That's pretty amazing. That's a crazy trajectory. Swati, what about you? Was there something you saw when you were coming up that said, oh, hey, I want to be talking about space for the rest of my life?
So it was somewhat similar to Tracy's story. I was inspired by Star Trek, not necessarily the people on it, but the visions that they had of space, like these grand depictions of that you could go to places in the universe and the rules could just be different there, that you fundamentally had no idea of what it was going to be like, just because you knew something, close to Earth of what you had known before, or people that you know before, species, that those rules didn't necessarily apply further on. So seeing watching Star Trek, watching it with my parents who are both in the science and tech field, was kind of that impetus to grow a love for space. I didn't necessarily think I was going to go into space until again, around high school time, where I made the jump into engineering. And then once making that decision to NASA, it was stories like Kalpana Chawla, looking at I thought for the longest time I wanted to be an astronaut. And eyesight and stuff didn't really meet with those requirements, but that exploration feel of it, I had the opportunity when I was in grad school to work on a project that was on the International Space Station. So I was one of the ones chosen who actually got to go to Houston and train the astronauts on this project and meet with them. And one of the astronauts was Sunita Williams, and just being able to talk with her while she was in space running our experiments and then back on the ground was just, eye-opening of seeing how that perspective is, how they can actually do the research or support that. I decided that I liked the writing of the experiments more than the execution that they did. So I ended up finding my path to JPL because I liked the out there version of it. JPL is one of the ones who focuses on interplanet to try to go as far out as we can from our solar system and see what else is there. With Voyager reaching the edges of the solar system and all the planetary missions that tried to reach the boundary. That's what drew my interest of how far can we look at? How far can we venture out of our solar system to understand what's out there?
That's so wild. I grew up in Dallas, Texas. And so the trip to NASA in Houston was a rite of passage in 8th grade. Like you had here, that was like, everyone looked forward to that trip. And I will never, ever forget it. I think that's just really beautiful what you had to share about thinking about how far can you go? And I love that JPL is doing that. I actually had no idea about that. Katherine, I'm curious, when you're sitting down and you're working on your piece, how important is it to you that it's scientifically accurate?
Oh, it's very important to me, not only because I want to be authentic and true to real life, but also because space and science and exploration is so cool. I did a lot of research about what these astronauts went through, how they trained for their missions, what they did on their missions. It's awesome. They get to defy gravity. Kathy Sullivan was the first American woman to do a spacewalk, and she got to circle Earth, at 15,000 miles per hour and see dozens of sunrises and sunsets. So I read a lot about that. These astronauts got to see further into the universe than we'd ever seen before. As I said, I also went to JPL, did just lots of research reading. I read the oral histories of the astronauts. I learned a lot about the early space shuttle program. And I should mention the other women that I'm writing about, which is, of course, the first woman in space, Sally Ride, but also the first woman to do a spacewalk, Kathy Sullivan, and then the first Jewish American woman in space, who was Judith Resnick, and the first mother in space, who was Anna Fisher, who I also got to meet, and she's still a huge champion for space flight, and that was a real inspiration for me. The two other women were Ray Seddon and Shannon Lucid, And they also had incredibly inspiring stories. So I'm sort of a science geek at heart, and I just dove right in and read as much as I could. Also, as being a Sloan grantee, I'm lucky enough to get an advisor on my project, and Becca and I are still working on that, but that's going to be really exciting. I'm thrilled about it.
Guneet, I have a similar question for you, but a little bit different angle, I think, because I know a lot of truth informed your work, right? It was already inspired by something that really happened. And we know truth is always stranger than fiction anyway. But as you were getting ready to craft a story and you're working on it, I mean, when did you feel times that you wanted to have some artistic license? Was there ever moments that you felt were poetry that you could somehow put in a different lens in the way that you presented it, that you couldn't maybe do in a book, say, where it just really lended itself to film?
Absolutely. I mean, this is larger than life. This is as large as it gets. To be able to recreate some of it, to be able to create that experience with the power of audiovisual. I think, I mean, we make films and we tell stories, but this is something which has our heart beating every morning, to be able to, do this and to be able to add what we do to these amazing journey that that Kalpana has had. It's nerve-wracking. It's an honor everyday basis, but it also is something that we are super conscious about. That there is some artistic freedom that that does inform us as storytellers to to be able to really make this, which will bind the whole world together, which will tell every little girl around the world that you can, even though it's more about the dream than the end of the dream, but it's more about being able to live that life. So yes, our writer director has taken liberties of making the film, the script, and in fact, with the support of Film Independent and Sloan, we've gotten a lot of script notes that we are constantly leaning into. But yeah, it is a journey, and it's also exploratory for us to be able to put this together in the best way possible.
I'm one of those people that, when I'm approaching a piece of work, I usually have so much material, and so much of it is about like figuring out exactly what it is I need. What are the puzzle pieces I need to tell the story? Did you find that to be true, Rahul, in this particular story? I can imagine you had just like so much rich things you wanted to dive into, but you can only do, you only have so much space in your story.
No, absolutely. And but the thing is, if you want to take artistic freedom and liberty, for that you need to do your research really well. You need to know the rules so that you can, take the liberty to break it when you need to. So I remember with our director, we went to NASA in Houston for 3 days. In fact, on the day Kalpana passed away 3 years ago, with all the families of the astronauts who lost their loved ones on Columbia. And we were like kids when we met the other astronauts at NASA, because they took us through a tour and they were telling us where Kalpana visited, where she would eat her sandwich. So these are all her life, but also in terms of the science that she was trying to explore, we just had to learn it all as much as possible. As much as we need to know, so that we can then portray it on screen. But at the end of the day, it is film. And we're making films for people beyond who can get inspired by the field. And for that, we would need to make it more accessible. And that for that, I would say we would need to take artistic freedom, but that in no way needs to, it needs to be appropriate, what we're trying to portray. Otherwise it shows. And there's no fun. And film is so specific and fun because you can dive into various fields to just explore. It gives you the opportunity to just learn. And that's what we were treating this as and continue to treat this as, to just learn more about this.
I just wanted to add that, Kalpana's name translates into imagination. And there is just so much poetry in the journey of this. She self-named herself. One of the facts, when she was super young in school, she only had a nickname before, and her teacher gave her a choice, and she chose Kalpana. And in, as Columbia went up, one of the songs that played was Imagine. And that song was dedicated to Columbia later. So there's just poetry in life, Yeah.
I love that. Just so everybody knows, we are going to be taking questions from you. So please send in any questions that you have. Okay, I have to, with what she just said, I have to know, Tracy, Swati, favorite songs. What are your favorite songs? Inspirational songs that you listen to before a mission, when you're sitting to.
I don't have songs that I listen to before a mission, but I have recently come across a song that is just, I can't listen to it that often because it just makes me cry. What is it called? Okay, I'm gonna look it up on my phone. Swati, over to you. Wait, I gotta tell you.
I don't think I have a good answer to that. I don't think I can pull my favorite song out of a hat right now. I will say that our surface team, we have a tradition where every day at the beginning of the shift, the flight director in charge gets to pick a song of the day, and they play it for the entire ops team to kind of get them going. And it's usually like some play on words of the song and the objective that they're trying to build. That's all, which is kind of fun. It ranges full scale from like, country to rap to, rock and roll to oldies. It's really fun because then you're like typing away and getting all your stuff, and you have the whole thing playing on the Voca.
I'd love to hear more about some of those little practices, those little details. Are there any things that you do every day as you're getting ready to do your work, or even ending your day? Are there things that we should know that you do?
So while we were doing Perseverance cruise operation, we had a big jug of marbles. So one empty one on the day of launch and one full one. It had a marble for every day that we were going to be in space until we got to Mars. So we had a daily status tag up at 8:30, which everyone would call into, and everyone got to watch as one person would be designated that day to take the marble from the big pot and move it over to the completed day. So every day as we completed another sol, we got to move one marble to the next day. And we got to see very visually as we went through, the marbles kind of tipping over until we, on landing day that morning, we did the final one to move it over, saying we had finished our in-space portion of Mars 2020.
Nice. Oh, Tracy, I see the favorite song. She put it in the chat. Sleeping at Last by Saturn. A must listen. Okay.
It's so beautiful. I can't even stand it. And one of the lines in it is about how someone taught him about stars and how stars carry on endlessly even after they die because the light is still going out eternally across the universe. It's so gorgeous. Love it.
I got to check it out. We do have one question here that I should ask you, and forgive me if we covered it because I think we might have mentioned it, but let's just hit it home. It's for both Swati and Tracy. What field of study or what field did you study to get to become a systems engineer at JPL?
Yeah, I studied mechanical engineering myself, but you don't have to study that. You could study aerospace engineering, you could study electrical engineering, there's a whole bunch of things that you could study. And the thing I will also answer is, there is systems engineering, which you can major in too. I tend to tell folks that I recommend starting with one of the other engineering disciplines first to get a deep technical foundation, and then maybe go work first and see what you're going to be using system engineering for, because it can be a little theoretical and you can miss the fact that the beating heart of system engineering is problem solving and working with a huge array of things in order to solve problems. And if you just go at systems engineering straight, you might think it's this weird checkbox thing that doesn't really apply to reality and solving technical problems, but that's not it. It's fine.
That's basically the whole answer. I mean, I did aerospace engineering and then aeronautics, astronautics, but like Tracy said, system engineering, there are classes on it, but at least the way we do it at JPL, it's about bringing all the pieces together. So I would say more than half of it is learned on the job at JPL, the way that we do it. And it's because it's so integral to how to fit all these pieces together that we try to have the firm foundation in a discipline, whether it's electrical or computer science or aerospace, mechanical structures, thermal, and then bring that up so that people know they have like a anchor in their discipline, and then they can branch out and they kind of see what their discipline has tentacles to, and you learn it. And then that way you can kind of work at the higher level and understand how to get across and bring those pieces together.
Right. Okay. We have another question. Now it's interesting because this question is actually, I think, directed toward Tracy and Swati, but I'm going to open it up to the filmmakers because I'd love to hear your answer to this. It's asking, how do you find yourself dealing with discrimination professionally, and how do you overcome this in the moment or address it in your projects? I'm curious as to how you portray that in your stories, or do you portray that, and sort of maybe describe a scene or something for us to give us a clue as to how you put gender discrimination or discrimination in any way, shape, or form on screen.
I could go. Well, having been a camera operator a while back, I was one of the first women as well, kind of in New York, working in that capacity years ago. And so I really related to a lot of what these women went through as they integrated NASA and, you know, fought their way in with men who had never worked with women before, a lot of them. Some of the discrimination I might have seen as I was researching also made these women really relatable. Like Anna Fisher gave birth 3 days before starting intensive mission training. And she really felt that she had to prove she could have a baby and do the job. She didn't take any time off. And she was actually criticized for leaving her baby to fly to space to fulfill her dream. Whereas she pointed out that none of the men, you know, were asked about leaving their kids behind. And she also took a lot of video just in case she didn't come back, which I found very poignant. As well as Sally Ride, when she had a lot of pressure being the first to fly, she really carried, you know, the weight of all women's path forward in space on her shoulders. And she had to deal with a lot of ridiculous questions from the press, like, will you wear a bra in space? And, you know, she had, which, you know, the men didn't have to put up with. But I felt like a lot of these challenges just really show how they persevere and they don't let anything stop them. And that really spoke to me.
Rahul, did you want to add anything? I'm so curious as to, you know, how does that play out, the gender and how it's overcome in your work?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it really does, because it exists. And I remember when we received the first draft of Kalpana by the writers last year, there was this beautiful scene where, and which happened in reality, where before Kalpana went to space for the first time, after her training, when she was undergoing training, there was this wall with photographs of all astronauts that had gone to space. And she was standing and seeing all the astronauts' photographs, and she realized that majority of them were men who went to space back in the early 90s. Things have changed so far, but still not as much as it should be. And a lot of it is really taken from what Swati and Tracy did mention earlier. It just exists in the society, and that needs to change. And for that, both men and women both need to, you know, change their perspective towards that about equality. But specifically about our screenplay, I don't think we thought so much about it. It just came very organically because it exists in reality, and we just had to portray it and what exists. Yeah.
I have a question for Tracy and Swati. I think this is an easy one. Here we go. What should a high school student do to figure out what job in the field of space they would like to do? Actually, now that I asked that question, it's actually pretty hard.
I gotta get it.
Okay.
So I would say explore, you know, read up as much as you can. The field of space is so huge. And there's so many different ways that you can contribute. You know, everything from artists to graphic design to like structures to like welders to, you know, computer scientists to geologists to planetary stuff. There's so many different things that you can do to contribute that it really involves exploring, you know, doing some research and talking to people and taking classes, reading books about all the things possible, and then looking inside to see what your passion is, because there usually is a way to feed that passion into something that supports the space industry. And when you can do that, then you're taking that intrinsic part of you that makes you so motivated and excited and bringing it to the thing that you want to do and forging your own path rather than trying to follow someone else's path, because there's a million different ways to get to the same endpoint, and it's best to do it by being true to yourself.
Yeah, we are so mind melded on that. Exactly, like all the points. And I'll just pile on a couple of examples to what Swati said. Like, I've met people at the lab who started out in music and then got interested in synthesizers and then moved from that to science instruments that study sound wave. There's so many ways you can get there. We literally have full-time artists who do things like artist conceptions, which aren't just for the public. A lot of times we engineers and scientists need those to help us visualize what we're doing too. And a young lady that I mentor, you know who you are when you hear this if you're watching, hi, told me about a class she recently heard about that combines social justice and space. So like literally anything you're interested in, you can combine with space. And because all of the things we're doing are so complex with the autonomous missions, with the manned missions, ultimately someday permanent presence on the moon and other places, it takes a village to do all those things. And it takes a variety of different talents and interests to make it all happen. So don't feel like you have to be a scientist or you have to be an engineer. That's totally not true.
Wow. Oh, I got one for you, Guneet. You ready? It's a hard one. Favorite space film or series?
I have to say Gravity. And it's so mesmerizing. I mean, I can feel anything in the day and just open Gravity, from the music to the visuals of it. It's just gorgeous and it's stunning. More recently also Hidden Figures, but really Gravity has my heart.
Mm-hmm. Katherine, I have one for you too. You know, knowing your background and knowing, you know, your daughters and, you know, the family and everything and the work that you did, when it came time to look at who all is going to be behind the camera of your piece, how top of mind was gender equality, gender balance on your crew, and as you think about all of your films going forward?
Well, as somebody who always tried to hire not just the person that was most capable for the job as a camera person, but also I hired a lot of women because they were capable and great at their job. And I formed a sisterhood with my camera friends and coworkers. So it's very important to me, and not just as far as female driven crews, but also diversity with all sorts of types of people and backgrounds. And I just want to echo something about Tracy was saying with teamwork, because that's very crucial for a film crew as well. It's very similar in a way. You have this mission to complete this film and to make it the best thing it can be. And I just loved in that video when they said about the Psyche mission that they're building something so complicated that no one person can understand it. But as a team, they can make it happen. And that's really has a great correlation to filmmaking.
Yeah, it really does. You're right. Tracy, here's one for you. I think this is so interesting. So corporate, meaning non-governmental spaceflight and space entities and agencies seem to be growing. What are the pros and cons of aeronautics and space exploration being done by corporations and wealthy individuals as opposed to governments?
That's such a great question. How do I not talk for half an hour? Let's see. So let me first preface this by saying you're about to get the opinion of Tracy Drain and not the opinion of NASA. But I see that historically there's been a split, right? With the things that we're doing in space, the first trips to the moon, the Voyager missions, the things that we're doing which are really hard, cost a fair amount of money and aren't going to get you any financial return, like those are the things that we need government funding to support. Like that's what's pushed us out into space. But when you get to the point where things become understandable, repeatable, building rockets and building a similar type of spacecraft to go to visit another place for a long period of time, it becomes more viable to have private corporations do those sorts of things. And in my mind, over most of my career, I thought about the split in that way. I know it's changing a little bit now that we have extremely wealthy individuals who are like, well, I don't want to just do the things that are easy and understandable. I'm going to go push the boundaries myself. I think that's kind of, in a way, it's great because it just provides more impetus for us as a human species to get out there and do things. I know, again, the opinion of Tracy Drain, that the thing that gets a little complicated about it is those individuals with their visions aren't necessarily thinking about what is the best thing for the world? What is the best thing for equal access to space? How do I make sure we make this diverse? And it's just, you know, maybe they have some of those goals, but maybe they don't. And so it gets shaped by a narrower perspective. And I love the fact that there are organizations like Arizona State University has an interplanetary initiative, which Lindy Elkin-Stanton, the science lead for Psyche, is heading up. And they're trying to get universities and government entities and private companies together in order to help think about what our vision is for humanity's expansion out into space, to try to get out in front of it and to shape it in a way that is trying to build in some of those values about sustainability. Let's not just go out and trash the place because it's big and we can, and let's figure out how to make it accessible and pull everybody in. So there are people who are trying to think about it in that way, which I find to be very inspiring.
Swati, I think this is a good one for you. What are some common misconceptions about space that people have from the media? And what would you like to see depicted on screen, science-wise, that rarely gets screen time?
So I would say the first, space is really, really, really big. That would be the first thing. I think there's a scene in Gravity where they jump from like the International Space, from Hubble or something, to the International Space Station, which are in two completely different altitudes and would require enormous velocity changes in order to actually make that work. Not feasible to do. There was also that technology, while generally translatable, is not necessarily always understandable across different organizations. So while it'd be great to have a common system between, you know, NASA or ESA, and we try, especially for the missions that we're working on together, it's a constant task that on these missions that we're working together, we need to really be cognizant about what they're doing and how to fit these pieces together. So it's not as simple as, oh, there's a spacecraft up there, let's just go connect to it and we can suddenly start using it. And then the dynamics in space are in some sense simple. It's F equals ma. So if you want to go right, you just go right. If you want to go left, you fire the thruster and go left. There's no banking in space because that's fundamentally because of an atmosphere, which we don't have out in interstellar space.
Now, see, every time I see banking, I'm going to be like, that couldn't happen. And I've never thought about it before. Like,
oh, yeah, I think I got into trouble on my second date with my husband because we watched Armageddon and they were like flying over the ice field and they banged. I'm like, you're at NASA. And I just lost it. And my husband's like, shut up. Let's just watch the movie.
My God. Rahul, I have a question for you. This person wants to know how long it took to go from concept to script to project for your project. The question goes on. It's these stories involve so much research, and I would love to know how long the process has taken. And do you have anyone involved as a consulting producer and or someone to review the accuracy?
Can I say forever? Because it's been such a tough journey putting this story together. I mean, it takes time. Mounting any film is a task, and it's a beautiful task, but it's a very tough task. And really thanks to Film Independent and other organizations who support independent producers like Guneet and myself, who are sitting across the oceans, but wanting to tell a story beyond borders and boundaries. It's taken a while because Guneet first wanted to make a film on Kalpana in 2017. That's when I met her a couple of months after she tried to explore. And then I got involved speaking with Kalpana's husband and trying to figure out how we can collaborate to tell her story. And then it still continues. The journey still continues. We have a script that we had written, which we went all across town in LA and in India pitching it. But in LA, people said, oh, it's a brown woman story, so it needs to have more of India. And we said, but she lived half her life in America. She's as much an American as much as she's an Indian. And in India, they were like, oh, Kalpana Chawla, she's a hero, but let's make the story in Hindi and in a local language. And we were like, but how? She spent half her life in NASA and she went to space with no Indians. So she's got to speak in English. So there are, struggles at this level as well. But you got to keep at it. And we're just so determined to tell the story. So the journey is to find like-minded people so that we can collaborate and we can be mad together to put this out there.
Yeah, we can empower each other and share the common dream. And that's when I said, to nurture it, to protect it, because we want to be able to tell an English language film with global footprint about a brown girl in space. And stuff like that has not happened. So when you're doing something for the first time, the challenges that come with it, all we can do is show up every day and give it our best and keep pushing. And one day the village will come together and it will happen. So we are on it.
The collection of madness, as we say. What it was? I think there's something true to that. I mean, I really do. We have a question. I think it's for anybody. I love it. I think it's the shortest question we've had all day. Here it is. Is anyone interested in exoplanets?
Yeah, dude. I spent 2 years of my life working on the Kepler mission, which was out there to go find exoplanets around other stars in our galaxy. And even though I only spent like a year and a half before launch and then a few months after launch and then had to go my merry way, I have avidly paid attention to the science of that mission because it's just brain destroying how many planets it found out there. Like, I think the scientists were able to infer from the 100,000 stars they were looking at and the handful of thousand planets that are in the data set, that if you multiply that across the whole sky, there's like literally billions with a B planets out there. Like the sky is dripping with planets in any direction that you look, and it's ridiculous. So if you haven't learned about the Kepler mission and its finding, please do yourself a favor and go look and test. The mission is out there finding exoplanets now. It's astonishing.
Okay, so if I can't afford a Caribbean island for my retirement, do you think I could get an exoplanet?
That's a great question. I wonder if they'll start letting people name exoplanets.
We have a question here. I think it's actually harkening back to something we were just talking about. So how do you feel about the illusion of time and the use of it in a nonlinear fashion in the movie Interstellar? Okay, this has gotten real specific. In addition, I'm curious about your thoughts on the theory of possibly worlds and how that correlates with our current existence here on Earth. And it got philosophical. I'm loving the questions, guys. Thank you so much.
I can try to answer the other part. It kind of goes back to what Tracy said. What we know so far is that space is really big, and what we have sampled of it, like with Kepler, has shown that there's billions of planets out there. And just seems like even the possibility of having life with that much options, right? That many planets across the whole universe, there's got to be life somewhere. We may not be able to see it right now or may not have the technology for it, but if you just consider how vast, we're always learning every day with all of these missions how vast it is and how our knowledge of it is only one small piece of that. And as we continue to grow, I, at least again, my opinions, not on behalf of NASA or anything, but I'm optimistic that eventually we can find some indication that there's life somewhere out there. Or was somewhere out there in the past.
She said it.
My opinions only, not on behalf of NASA. Although we will hopefully get a chance when Perseverance's samples come back to Earth, in many years, if there was life on Mars, because if their life may have been on Mars, that's what Perseverance is trying to go for.
Wow, mind blowing, right? I'm so curious about your next film, Katherine. Are you already thinking about what's next? What's something else you want to dig into, and will it be space related?
I am digging into another sort of female empowerment story. It's not space related. It has to do more with the empowerment of like teenage girls from very diverse backgrounds, at-risk kids, and homeless teenagers who come together to basically play a sport, this form of street soccer called futsal, and they become a family through that. And they go on they have a goal of winning the Street Child World Cup, which is a real life World Cup for homeless teenage people around the world. And so I'm drawn to that story again, because I played sports growing up, and I love how they empower you and also give you that sense of teamwork and confidence.
Just out of curiosity, because I loved hearing their story about, what it took to set the movie up and meeting with all the different people and pitching around. What was your experience like?
Oh, for me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my experience is similar, really. I feel like we traveled the same path. I pitched the story first and had a lot of great reception. People were very intrigued, but they kind of wanted more attachments or more of a track record, maybe on my part. I ended up writing the pilot. I felt really lucky to get into the Film Independent Episodic Lab last year around this time, which was amazing, sponsored by Netflix. So we got to pitch to a lot of the Netflix folks and also other industry people. And Angela led it, she's amazing. And so that I did get some interest through that. Unfortunately, with the pandemic and then just everything tightening up as far as budgets go, that space seems like expensive. But I'm still like Rahul and Guneet gonna forge ahead and keep going because I feel like this story really needs to be told. I just feel like we don't see that many women adventurers and explorers stories out there, and I think it's really important, and hopefully some people with money will think so too.
I'm just going to do full disclosure here, guys. Before the pandemic, now this was a while ago, I had a big anniversary party that Katherine came to, and we had fire dancers. And can I tell you, I cannot wait to have another big party with fire dancers. I need this pandemic to be done for more parties, to bring more filmmakers together, and fire dancers. Okay.
Best party I've ever been to.
Well, thank you. Actually, I went to a party in India that was off the chain. I'm just gonna put that out there. And this is an interesting question. I think, I don't know, I'm gonna open it up to anyone who wants to answer. Is it a buzzkill to ask about space junk? The consequences of those, I can't even pronounce this correctly. Is it going to be consequential in our lifetime? Space junk, the things, the I don't know, the extra out, how do you say this word? Detritus?
Yeah.
Okay.
I only read it. I think it's detritus. Is it detritus? I don't know.
Detritus? Okay. See, I can't even pronounce space junk. So, okay.
You might be right. I could do
But I mean, I've heard about it. I've definitely heard about it. Doing some special meetings that I've had with the Air Force, and they've talked quite a bit about it, and you read about it. Is it something that's top of mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely something we have to think about when we are either launching spacecraft or spacecraft are doing an Earth flyby like Juno did on the way through. NORAD tracks all the little bits of things that are above a certain size, and we need to make sure that our spacecraft aren't going to run into them, or if they can do a little bit of trajectory tweaks in order to miss them. I mean, Swati's right that space is big, even the space around our planet. But when you look at, there's some really interesting, maybe they have it in Eyes on the Solar System with the Earth one, where you can like turn on all the satellites that are around. And you're like, wow, there's a lot of stuff there around the Earth. And when spacecraft have problems or they break up, then it does create a debris field that can become harmful for the other satellites that are anywhere in a similar orbit. Swati, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so with NOAA tracking all the items, we have regulations on when we launch things, how we're supposed to dispose of them. So there's a couple of different options. You can either push them into the atmosphere and let it burn up, or you can push them into another orbit. And there's current research and development being done on how best to clear out the debris in that orbit. So there researchers across different areas, like in the universities, looking at different techniques of like, well, what if you went and sent like a space tug to that field and it would go and like pick up these things and then, move them down or move them out? Or can you go and go to this debris field and like repurpose something, like go and get, an extra wheel or a panel from this that may be still working, but the overall spacecraft wasn't. So there are kind of researchy items in work of how to mitigate that debris field, how to best utilize it, whether it's like clearing it out or whether it's actually like using it or using it as a parts lab for eventual assembly techniques that we could do on space. They're kind of still in the very low TRL phase. I think as we start to see more and more different entities with the capability to launch and being putting stuff into orbit, that need is going to grow. And usually the supply meets the demand. So eventually, hopefully, they'll meet to actually start resolving it.
Katherine and Guneet and Rahul, we were wanting to know, where are we going to be able to see these films? How are we going to be able to see your work?
Hopefully the whole world, once it gets done. That's the idea.
Yeah. Okay.
It needs to be celebrated globally and discussed globally. It's not something that we want to make in India and then, take it to the world. We want to make it as one of the big motion pictures. And that's the dream that we have seen. And you'll know, with all the marketing and with all the fanfare, I mean, that's the thought, that's the idea. And that's why we are choosing to work with people, and we're choosing to take our time to bring the vision together and share that ambition. So hopefully.
Is there a timeline or not really? Is it just, I know it must be such a difficult time as a filmmaker right now, right? I mean, the pandemic, I say this as if I'm asking a question. I know this because I'm living it. And, I know it's always a moving target as we're making our pieces. And every day, I mean, I keep having to move things from things that we're going to be in 2021 now are moving to 2022. And, so I'm just so curious how you're dealing with that moving target as well.
Yeah, I think we were not prepared of 1.5 years of not being able to travel from India to LA to be able to push our project, to be able to do the hustle that we need to be able to meet people in person. But we are very hopeful that this will be a 2023 release. So hopefully we can make it next year. And that's what we are working on now.
And mine is actually a TV series. So yes, I plan to have it be global as well. And at this stage, I'm looking for a producer attachment and/or talent that can attract financing and get it off the ground. And yeah, it would be great as well by 2022 or 23.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think to keep my sanity, my new mantra is take time out of the equation. I know that's probably something my JPL scientists don't think about, but for me, that's really important. Right now to stay focused on just the quality of the work and making sure the work is great and not getting hung up on the time. It's, that's been a major lesson for me. We have a couple more questions and I think we're going to wrap up. This one is, this is interesting. How can filmmakers best collaborate with scientists? What's been your experience there?
Oh, is Rahul muted?
Sorry. We have a very exciting advisor for us on our project. This fantastic astronaut from NASA, Stephanie Wilson, who has been attached to us, and she's been such a kind supporter of the project right from the inception. And she had known Kalpana for many years. And also I had the lovely privilege to meet Sunita when I was in Houston, and we hung out, ate a lot of dosas, and got to know a lot of fun facts about Kalpana and just the life of an astronaut and a person who works at NASA. So Stephanie at every level is, we lean heavily on her. We ask her the dumbest of questions that come to our mind, just so that we try and avoid banking issues when the film comes. That's been our process, to try and know the rules so that you can break them.
Yeah, and it's dinner time here. I'm really now craving doses. Anyone can answer this question. What do we think that the future of space travel is going to look like? Hey, anyone have an imagination, or maybe you know something we don't know?
I'll take a stab, which is purely in the imagination realm. And I'll claim this is another place where I am inspired by people who write movies and TV shows. I personally I'm such a big fan of the show The Expanse. I think that it does a wonderful job staying true to the books. I love their treatment of real physics and things in the show. It's fantastic. And I love the fact that their vision of not too super far distant has humans spread out across the solar system and having colonies on Mars and having the colonies trying to grow things on ice fields in Ganymede and out there at Jupiter, and that the different places have grown into their own different cultures and how they have some, infighting amongst them, and everyone has opinions on what Earthers are like and opinions on what Marsers are like. I love that. And I think that our future of space travel is going to look like humans bringing all of our foibles with us. And it's going to be about the society and how it evolves as we move out into space.
Maybe we can get it right in space. What do you know? I don't know. Maybe
we'll certainly learn something along the way, like trying to come together as teams to get there. That'll teach us a lot, but will we be perfect?
Well, I'm going to end on a positive question, and it's for anyone. What are you most excited about right now? What are you most excited about, whether it's in space or in storytelling? And I know it's a weird year to ask this type of question.
I can try to. So I was really heartened when we had the Perseverance landing in spite of the pandemic right after the election and all these things happening that people got so excited about it. And it was really heartening to see how science and exploration can be such a positive influence that really spreads across the world and transcends boundary and gives someone something to hold on to that is relatable across the whole globe. That doesn't matter which side of the aisle you sit on, what side of the world you happen to be viewing from, but that positive, hopeful message of something that the whole world can come across. And I'm really excited to see if we can bring that forward with these different missions that NASA is doing in collaboration with different agencies, with these storytelling of how space really gives us that perspective of when you're out there, it is just one big Earth. We are just one big people. And the more we tell those stories, we kind of bring that underlying message through osmosis again and again to people that we are just one people and give them something to rally around that's a positive influence for society.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's like every time I think about it, I think I'm just a little speck. I'm just a little speck, and it's so fragile, and you kind of have to celebrate every moment. I want to tell everyone, thank you so much. Thank you for coming and sharing your time. Tracy, Swati, Rahul, on the other side of the planet, Guneet, thank you so much. Katherine, it was a fascinating and wonderful discussion. And I hope everyone had a great time. Thanks to Sloan and everyone involved. And I guess I'll see you on the other side. Any last words, any parting words?
Thank you so much for putting this together and having us.
Thank you, Wendy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Everyone here, thank you. This is epic.